Hi, this is Nerissa.
And this is Katryna.
And together we are
The Nields.
Here with John Broughton.
On KC Radio.
97.7 FM.
I know there's only a couple of years age difference between the two of you, so which one of you was the first to show a serious inclination towards music?
Well, we grew up in a family that where music was just sort of part of living. Like, our dad played guitar, not in any sort of fancy or professional way, just that was sort of something that happened every day. He took the guitar out of its case at the end of the day after he came home from work, and he played a few songs that he liked. And in the summertime, when we would go outside and sit around a campfire, we would sing songs. Or when we go over to a friend's house for dinner, we'd bring the guitar and sing along afterwards. But what I remember, we went to a school that had lots and lots of music too. But what I remember is when this is Katryna speaking, and I'm the younger of the two of us. When I was in 6th grade and Nerissa was in 8th grade, we were both in a Christmas, there was a full school Christmas pageant that happened. This is back in the late 70s or early 80s. I can't remember quite which one. So they still did Christmas pageants back then. And the whole school was involved. And about 10 kids out of the whole school got chosen to sing solos. And I remember going to the bulletin board to see whether I'd gotten a solo. And there was not only my name, but also Nerissa's name. And I thought, wait, Nerissa is a singer too? I thought it was just me.
And I had the exact same reaction seeing that. I remember being like, oh, Katryna can sing, huh? And it was right around then. I mean, I had decided, this is Nerissa now, I had decided when I was 7 that I wanted to be a singer. And ideally, I would be a songwriter also. But I really thought songwriting was the highest and most magnificent of all the art forms, and that it was highly doubtful that I would ever actually be able to succeed at writing a song. So that was like this distant dream. But by the time I was 13, in fact, probably right around that time that we both found out that we each got a solo, I had just started writing songs. It was right after John Lennon had died. And I'd always been a Beatles fan, and I just remember feeling called, like, this is what I'm supposed to do. I'm a songwriter. And I began seriously writing songs, and I very quickly recruited Katryna to try to sing with me, because I figured out.
Well, and it was during an era when Nerissa was 13 and I was 11, and that meant that there were like 50 years between us in age. And so Nerissa she had recently sort of stopped playing with me. So when she asked me to come in and sing a harmony on a song that she'd written, it was, the most exciting, most wonderful thing that could possibly happen to me. So I guess that maybe answers your question.
So it sounds like both your individual tastes in music were very much aligned.
Yes, we both loved the Beatles. I mean, I followed Nerissa around like a puppy, so anything she liked, I liked. We loved the Beatles, lots of American folk music, and a little bit of sort of 70s country and Western music, like Emmylou Harris and Willie Nelson and Waylon Jennings and
Dolly Parton,
Linda Ronstadt.
Oh, Linda Ronstadt, yeah.
So that had been definitely, and our dad had loved Buddy Holly and Elvis, so there was a little of that in the house too. But yes, our musical tastes were similar.
Yeah, very much so. And yeah, well, Katryna's already said that our parents were just very musical and they sent us to a school that emphasized music. So it was kind of all around us.
Yeah.
But they weren't musical like you have to practice every single day. They were musical like you have music around you the way you have food or water.
Yeah.
You just sort of, or nature. It's just there and anybody's allowed to have it. And so I think that's part of why folk music has always appealed to us, is that it's just so available and you don't have to be, educated at the finest institutions in order to have music. It's just there.
So without that initial influence from your parents, do you think you still would have gravitated to music in the same way that you did?
That's like an impossible.
You mean if our parents hadn't infused us with music?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like they wanted us to be professional musicians at all. In fact, when I first said to my father, and I was in college, it was like halfway through my time in college that I'd stopped songwriting for a while, and then I'd taken a songwriting class, and I just got the bug back. Like, this really is what I want to do, and I'm only 20 years old, and if not now, when? I really want to do this. I love nothing more than, sort of singer-songwriter music. At that time, I was really into Joni Mitchell and Bob Dylan, and Suzanne Vega had just had her first hit with Luca, and Michelle Schacht was out, 10,000 Maniacs, Sinead O'Connor, Tracy Chapman. Yeah, we got her album that very summer. And I remember saying to my father that I thought I might want to try this. And he was like, well, it's not a very happy life to be a musician. Like, they were nothing but supportive once we were definitive, but they really didn't expect that we were going to be, professional singers. They thought we were going to maybe go to law school, or I was thinking of going to divinity school. Maybe we'd be teachers. That was sort of more like what they thought, or academic.
Yeah, I think that maybe the answer to your question has to be yes, because maybe if we had music in school, only had to music was what we could get off of AM radio on our stereo. Maybe we wouldn't have thought that was themselves. Maybe we would have just thought it was something for us to listen to. But I definitely did not grow up thinking this is a normal career path and one of the many choices that I could make. I, like Nerissa, it took until sort of the middle of college, and I thought, I don't have to do this kind of work that I find very, very tedious. Be a performer, which I find joyful, and I love doing hard work around that. But it felt like cheating. It felt like dropping out of the world or something. It didn't feel like a normal path laid out in front of me.
Obviously, you're both very close. Having worked together for so many years, obviously you're both extremely close. Is the relationship between the two of you now much different to what it was before you started working professionally together?
I mean, I think it's even different than it was a year ago.
Yeah, I mean, we're yeah, that's right. That's a hard question to answer because I think we're so interwoven into each other's lives. Yeah, every year is a little bit different. I think it's a very active relationship, and we now are. For years, we lived about 25-minute drive apart, and in very different sort of kinds of towns. Katryna was in a rural town. I was in, college town, college city, tiny little city, and our kids, her youngest is a year and a half older than my oldest. And now that gap is nothing, and our kids are all friends, and Katryna now lives 2 blocks away from me. So we go for walks every day. Our kids are in each other's lives. In fact, Katryna's son was over here until about 5 minutes ago. And during the pandemic, as we've been, we've been like the only people that we've seen in person. Our families decided to become a pod about 2 or 3 months into the pandemic, and that kind of kept us sane. It kept us sane, but it also really dramatically, I feel like, altered our relationship for the better.
Yeah.
It's not the easiest thing in the world to work with your family member, But I think that the truth is it's not the easiest thing in the world to work with somebody.
Yeah.
And to make art with somebody. And ultimately, I feel like Nerissa is the easiest person for me to work with because we've been doing it for so long and we've worked so hard at taking care of our relationship the way you would with a spouse. We've really, each of us worked individually to try to bring our best selves to the relationship that we have with each other. And we've worked together. And we can be so honest with each other because we don't have any secrets.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would say we certainly have artistic disagreements. And we can also say things like, you're singing too much on the record. I need to get to sing more or I'm not going to be happy about it. And, we can say those kinds of petty, childish things. And we know how to argue without hurting each other.
Yeah.
We don't think we're very good at that.
Yeah, and I also think that when you're with somebody for this long, I'm sure that anybody that you're this close to, you sense when they're having a hard time.
Yeah.
And I don't know how it's been for you guys in Melbourne, but this has been to me a very the people that I'm close to, I have gotten much, much closer to. And I feel like I haven't gotten as much of that, of the socializing, meeting people in the grocery store and stopping and chit-chatting for 10 minutes and feeling my community that way. I've definitely been missing that. But the people I'm very close to, those relationships have gotten way deeper because we're what we've got.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. Has that sibling connection been a distinct advantage over the years in terms of your onstage dynamic together?
Yes, I mean, I think what I just said about how we work together, how we're able to say the sort of petty, childish kinds of things that you might not want to say to a colleague, but we can say to each other because we're sisters. We've had that from the beginning. I remember when Katryna finally, I was sort of begging Katryna to join this, to be in this band with me and to do this with me for a couple of years before she finally agreed. And what she said to me was, okay, but I will not be your Art Garfunkel. And that was really great that she said that. And of course I laughed at the time because we'd just seen the concert in Central Park. And, poor Art Garfunkel is got nothing to do with his hands. It's
and the whole mythos of the duo was that that Paul was sort of cruel to him.
Yeah.
But was that what you were thinking?
I really wanted to collaborate.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be the person. I didn't want to be your singer. Your lead singer.
Right.
I wanted to be a collaborator.
Yeah.
And that's how we approached the band when we started having, other members of the band. In the 90s, we played with 3 guys named Dave, one of whom I'm married to. And we sort of, a lot of manager types were like, you should have a backup band that is not part of the band. The band should be you. And they should be just hired hands. And that felt inauthentic to us. It just felt like we're not going to be able to do that. We only know how to collaborate. Or we only know how, I shouldn't say we only know how to collaborate. We only know how to be successful as collaborators. And so that is how we sort of approached having that all when it was all 5 of us.
Yeah, talk us through that transition from a 5-piece band to eventually going out as a duo.
Well, it was pretty simple. We started as a trio with my first husband, David Jones, who took my name, and that's why we became the Nields, because we all had the same last name, and we thought it was a funny, curious thing that the man had taken the woman's name, and then the other 2, we did that for 2 years, and we very quickly realized we didn't want to be an acoustic trio. We needed a bigger sound. Katryna's awesome friend, Dave Chalfant, who's now her husband, is just one of the most brilliant musicians we've ever heard. and he became our bassist, but also kind of our musical director in some ways.
And later our producer.
And Dave Hauer on drums is a very strong personality, he's a very musical drummer. And, you know, we were a really nicely balanced fivesome for a great number of years. But then starting in around 1999, my then husband, he was older than us. He really was tired of the road. Katryna's husband was tired of the road. And, you know, we couldn't play Katryna and me and the drummer. So, and we were also tired of touring in that way. We loved each other and we were still getting along, but we could see that, you know, it's very hard to put 5 people into a van and, you know, get them from here to there. It's very expensive. And so we initially had this idea that we would continue to tour in the Northeast as a 5-piece, but that Katryna and I would be the ones who would sort of go off and tour farther afield.
Or we would go to markets first, open for somebody, get a foothold, and then bring the band. And that was a successful recipe for a while. And then it just, people wanted to do other things.
Well, yeah, you had a baby, my marriage ended, and then I fell in love with my second husband, and I began to have a family. You know, we began to have kids, and it was just more and more rare for us to play as a 5-piece band. We did replace David Nields. What we did is Dave Chalfant became our guitar player, and we got a new bass player. But that bass player, you know, he only really played with us at certain shows, probably like 3 or 4 a year at the very most.
Yep.
And Katryna and I were very functional as a duo because, again, like we're light, we get along really well. We pretty much at every juncture had the same amount of desire to tour. You know, like, so when our kids were really little, we were willing to do this kind of thing. And then as they got older, we were only willing to do this kind of thing. So we've sort of been in lockstep with each other. And then when the pandemic happened, you know, our initial thought was, well, that's it. That's the end of our career. But then pretty quickly, we have an amazing manager, Patty Romanoff, who's been with us since 1994. And she's now managing Dar Williams and Susan Werner and Heather Maloney. And she said, hey, you guys, listen, you can stream. And anyway, long story short, we started streaming a show every single Monday night. And at this point, Katryna's husband, Dave, she'd lost all of his gigs. And so he started playing with us again. And we've been reinventing our entire 20-album oeuvre with the 3 of us playing, you know, mostly acoustic guitars. And it's been very satisfying musically. And our fans have been keeping us afloat through, you know, their financial support for the past 15 months.
It's certainly
been pretty extraordinary.
It's certainly made best of a bad situation, being able to still have that connection into your audience through the live streaming, which I guess so many artists have been doing over the last 12 months.
Yeah. I mean, the nice thing for us is in the 90s, we toured the whole country a lot. And probably we still did in the first part of the 2000s, but it's gotten less as our kids were older and sort of needed us more and weren't portable. And now we are able to reach, you know, the 5 to 10 people in Seattle, Washington who want to watch our show. But there weren't enough people in Seattle for us to fly there and do a show over the course of the past 5 or 10 years. So it's been kind of nice to reconnect with fans all over the place.
That initial change back in the earlier days from the 5-piece down to the duo, did it bring about a change in your fan base or the demographic of your audience?
Yes, it certainly did. I don't know if I would say demographic as much as Well, I mean, it
coincided. I think it did. I think, you know, there were actually, people used to say, you're the band that our family agrees on, meaning like the parents liked us and the teenagers liked us and even the little kids liked us. And that continued to be true into the aughts and the teens. But definitely our audience, we were playing at venues that appealed more to older people.
True, but I also think that those same people who were our fans in the 90s, they just got older.
That too. Exactly. That too. Both things.
It also 9/11 happened, which really changed touring for everybody that we knew for, you know, about 6 months to a year. And at the end of it, you know, we had also changed what the musical experience was. When we were a five-piece, we often played to sit-down folk venues, for sure. Mm-hmm. But we also played stand-up rock and roll clubs.
Yeah.
And we could no longer play stand-up rock and roll clubs. So all of those gigs were gone, unless, you know, a few times a year we would get the band back together. But mostly we changed to playing coffee houses, listening rooms, small theaters, that kind of thing. And
with Love in China, which was our first official duo record that came out on Rounder, we, you know, that record was intentionally country.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not country.
We did tour that with the band, though.
We did, but it was a very different sounding record than If You Lived Here, You'd Be Home Now, which is the record we made right before it with the full band. And we were intentional. Like, I mean, my marriage was breaking up, and I was like, the only music that makes sense to me to write right now is country and western. You broke my heart. And yeah. So when I listen to the songwriting and the arrangements, I'm always shocked at that transition, because it didn't feel so shocking to me at the time, because I was in the middle of it. But it's quite different.
Looking through your catalogue of albums, for either of you, is there one album in particular that really signifies a coming of age as artists and performers for you both?
Well, in some ways, I think I would say, I mean, I don't know quite what you mean coming of age. I could answer that in different ways. I mean, there's a way in which not play, but If You Lived Here, You'd Be Home Now felt that way. It felt like finally we are making an album on our terms. And Play was almost that way. But If You Lived Here, You'd Be Home Now, we got to make that at Dave's house, which was his studio. Katryna's in Dave's house. They were living together then. And we were able to take the entire summer to make the record. And it was joyful to do that. I mean, it was like, and we took so much care with each song. We were able to hire whatever musicians we wanted to come in and play on those songs.
I totally agree with you about the sort of approach that we took. The truth is, I remember very early in our career, we were opening for Ani DeFranco, and we were in the middle of making a record, and I was nervous about it, and I was saying how I was so nervous about it, and she said, "Oh, I just think of each record as just being a record of where I am at the time."
Mm-hmm.
And when I look back at our catalog of music that we've made, that's what it feels like to me. It feels like looking back through our history, and what we tried to do with every record was sort of be authentically who we were in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And both musically and topically, and Nerissa would write about what she cared about. And so to me, like when you say coming of age, I think, oh, well, that's Greta, because that's when I sort of transitioned from being a kid to an adult. That feels like coming of age.
Mm-hmm.
But I agree with Nerissa that the record that made me feel like this is who we got control of it and we got to decide how to do it, and we cleared the decks and didn't make ourselves gig a huge amount in the middle of making the record. We got to really focus on it. Was If You Lived Here, You'd Be Home Now. But I feel like that kind of about a lot of the records that we made in the 2000s. Like Love in China to me was a dream come true. I'd wanted Nerissa to write country songs for so long because they're like my nostalgia music, having grown up on that 70s country radio. I feel like when we made Sister Holler, which is like a folk record, it made me feel like, oh, I get to not sort of be ashamed of my folkiness. I get to just own it completely. And it was really fun to do that. And we made a record called The Full Catastrophe that was about parenthood and marriage. And a lot of people were like, that is not a smart career move. You shouldn't remind people that you're mothers. You're going to alienate people. And I felt like this is who we are. This is this is where the wisdom's coming from right now.
Yep.
And so I have a lot of pride in that record because of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question. We made 2 records before Bob on the Ceiling. And once we made Bob on the Ceiling, we actually made those other 2 records be out of print because we just felt like with each of those first 2 records, I wasn't happy with them. I wasn't happy with the way they sounded. I didn't feel proud of them. I felt like we were still trying to figure out who we were. With Bob on the Ceiling, I am still proud of that record. I will happily listen to that record. I remember figuring out how to sing on that record. Like that, to me, that's when I found my singing voice. And so in a way, that's my coming of age. Yeah, and I'm proud of every single song on that record.
Through the years, balancing balancing parenthood with a music career, was that an art that took a while to perfect?
We've definitely not perfected it.
Oh my God. I mean, that's the hardest part. It's the hardest thing. And I read this fantastic novel a couple of months ago by an American writer named Jenny Offill, Offill, called The Department of Speculation. And it's all about being a mother who wants to be an artist, but how that's impossible. And she writes with this wistfulness about men artists, and she calls them, she says they get to be art monsters. They're like nothing but monsters for their art. That's what they get to be. I want to be an art monster, but I can't because I'm a mother. And that sort of sense in which once you are a mother, nothing else is as important as your children.
Yep.
And for me, I mean, I think Katryna's experience has been a little bit different, but for me, I never feel like I'm being a good enough mother, and I never feel like I shouldn't say never, that I go around often feeling like I'm not a good enough mother because I'm distracted by this novel I'm writing or this song I want to compose, or I'm working out a problem in the song, or I want to go on tour and I'm thinking about my career, or I'm not a good artist because really all I'm thinking about is my daughter and my son and my husband and how I, need to do blah, 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 blah for them. It's hard, it's hard, but I do reject the idea that we have to be art monsters.
Have any of your children showed musical inclinations? Is the Nields musical talent being passed on to the next generation?
Yes, in many different ways. My older child is a bassist and has a band and is a songwriter. And my younger child is a singer. And Nerissa's oldest child is a really accomplished violinist. And younger child is also a great singer. I do think that the younger children feel like the older children staked out the territory of musician. And the younger children are like, music sort of oozes out of them, but they don't want to like go and sit down and practice.
Well, Lila does.
No, the younger children don't.
William and Johnny. Yeah. No, I think that's accurate. That's accurate.
Just want to touch on your songwriting, Nerissa. Has the procedure changed much through the years, or has it been a tried and true method all through the years, or does it vary from song to song?
That's a good question. It's a hard question for me to answer right now, because right now I'm writing novels, and I was just saying to Katryna a couple of hours ago, I really want to write a song next week. I think the last time I wrote a song was February. And that's a long gap for me, because I tend to write a lot of songs per year. And in some ways it hasn't changed, in that I always write the music and the words in sort of lockstep with each other. And by that I mean one inspiration or the other will come to me. Usually a concept will come to me. And sometimes a phrase, sometimes I'll have a dream and something will come, out of the dream. Oftentimes Katryna gives me an idea, says, I think you should write a song about, now I'm drawing a blank, but you come up with ideas for me all the time.
Gotta get over Greta,
yes. Or recently, I think you should write a song about the grand old flag and how it really isn't. Maybe we're beyond flags. And she's always giving me ideas, and I have bunches of collections of them. When I sit down to write a song, it always feels terrible at first, like pain. And I kind of have to rock around with my guitar, and I have a notebook out, and I have my computer out, and I have my phone now. I use the voice memo thing, and I sort of compose bit by bit until it begins to come together. And at the point at which I've got the first verse and the chorus, for me, the ingredients for success are first verse, chorus, I'm liking it all, and then I write something that makes me either laugh out loud or cry. And then I'm like, okay, it's a keeper. And but then Katryna has to like it. I have written songs that I think are really good, but Katryna doesn't really like them or want to learn them. Sometimes I'm wrong, though. And then sometimes I bring them to Dave and be like, Dave, you've got to take my side. Do you like the song? And put him in a terrible position.
No, it's good. Often he likes it, and then you guys make it into the thing that both of you can hear that I couldn't hear. And then I'm like, oh, yeah, I like that song now, too.
Yeah, that's true. So I think I used to, I think the biggest difference is that, when I very first started writing, I only wrote when I was hugely inspired. And then by the time I was really, I would say 1991, when we really officially started the band, I really understood that, okay, I have to be writing songs all the time and accept the fact that I'm going to write some bad songs in order to get some good songs. And then for about the next 20 years, I just went around thinking about songs all the time, listening to other people's songs, thinking about my own, constantly, it was like a thing going on inside my head all the time. This would make a good song, or maybe I could do this with a song. And then I started writing novels, and now I have a lot of that space is taken up with novels that I'm writing, which is bad for the songs.
Which is why you're going to write one next week.
Which is why I'm going to write one next week, and why I've been listening more to music and not so much to audiobooks.
So the novel writing and writing outside of songwriting, has that made you a better songwriter, do you think?
I think so. It depends, I think, on your taste. I think I definitely would have said so before this pandemic year. And the reason I'm hesitating is because we've been mining our old catalog, and there's a lot of songs from the 90s that I'm very proud of, especially musically. I do think my lyrics are better now than they were. They're more cohesive. I was very happy to write a song where the prepositions changed all over the place. Not the prepositions, the pronouns. The pronouns changed all over the place. So all of a sudden, the point of view would be second person when it used to be first person or third person. And, I think I'm writing more cohesively now, but that doesn't necessarily mean better. I do feel like I've written some of the best songs I've ever written in the past 5 years. For sure. Like I would say Normandy's and Tyrants Always Fall, and Wasn't That a Time are probably some of my strongest songs.
Katryna, it sounds like you're a very important sounding board in the whole songwriting process, though.
Well, I like to think so.
She is. She definitely is.
It is an incredibly fun thing to think of an idea for a song and have someone who's a songwriter go and make it for you. And it's happened a lot of times where I will have either a very specific idea for a song, like when Got Over Greta, I saw the graffiti in the women's bathroom at the Wetlands in New York City in the mid-'90s, and I came out of the bathroom and went to the dressing room and said, Nerissa, you have to write a song called Gotta Get Over Greta that's like Margaret Atwood's Cat's Eye about a platonic relationship that ends, and it's just as painful as any romantic relationship that ends, and Nerissa created Gotta Get Over Greta out of that. And I told Nerissa to write Tyrants Always Fall. The two things that she told me after the 2016 election were the quotation from Gandhi saying, throughout history, tyrants always fall. And that there were more people who voted against him than who voted for him. And there were more people who were against him than who voted for him. And I said, I need those two things put into a song to comfort me. And I didn't know that it was going to be a song that we ended up playing all the time. I just needed to have it in the world. And Nerissa made it for me. And, there's countless times that that's happened. I definitely think it's good for everybody to have their own personal songwriter.
And I definitely think it's great for every songwriter to have their own personal muse.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're lucky.
Let's talk about that wonderful album you put out last year, an album that was very reflective of the political climate in America over the past 4 years, and a great album as it was. Does another side of you wish there wasn't a need to write those songs?
Yes. And we did say all last year when the album came out, we didn't really get to tour it because of the pandemic, and we would say in our StreamYards and stuff, we're hoping that we don't have to sing these songs after November. And, it's kind of true at the very moment.
Yeah, it's seeming a little scary with each passing day but we have not actually been playing Tyrants Always Fall in our shows.
No, because
right now it doesn't feel like we need that.
It doesn't feel like it's the thing, but I think we're all pretty scared still. Like what happened on January 6th in our country was pretty terrifying to those of us who believe in democracy.
Yeah, and looking around the world, it just seems like the world is in a fragile place right now.
Yeah.
On that album was a wonderful interpretation of America the Beautiful. Tell us how that came together.
It was right after the 2016 election, and my husband and I went up to our little church. We attend a tiny little nominally congregational church that sort of feels somewhat Unitarian, and everybody there had voted for Hillary Clinton, and we were all in shock. And the minister, who is a really interesting guy, he's a poet, and he's a shepherd, literally, like he raises sheep, or he used to. He preached, it was right before Thanksgiving, and he preached about the treatment of indigenous people in this country. And he had a great line that was like, from Plymouth Rock to Standing Rock, we haven't changed. We're still not keeping our word. We're invaders, we're colonists. And right there in church, I took out a pen, and I often sing at church after the sermon. Like when they pass the hat, I stand up and sing a song. So right there, I thought, I'm going to make new lyrics to America the Beautiful, and I just wrote them on the church program, and I sang it right then. And then Katryna and I started singing it, and we wrote more and more different verses over the period of the next 4 years.
And when we were working on the record, we knew that we wanted to collaborate with some of our friends, and we thought it was going to be on an original song, and then I don't know, I can't remember whose idea it was, whether it was Nerissa's or mine or Dave's, but we thought, what about America the Beautiful? And
it was because we didn't like what we were doing on it. We tried to sing it and it was boring.
And so we were like, let's get other people to help us. So we reached out to
Chris Smither
and Peter Mulvey and Dar Williams, and my older child's band sings on it, and
Vance Gilbert.
Vance Gilbert does an incredible job. And Ben Demerath, and they transformed the song for us, and they came in sort of one by one. I mean, I think about how it might not have been able to happen if we had been making the record 3 months later or something. It feels very lucky that we got all of those voices included. And then while we were all shut up in our homes, we decided to make a video of it. And I asked everybody to, film themselves doing their different parts, and then we put it together into a video.
Well, it was also that George Floyd got murdered, and I wanted to write that new verse about reparations.
I don't think that's in the video. Oh.
Yes. Yeah, that's why we made the video. I wrote that verse, and I wanted to re-release the song because I felt like the song needs this verse. And then I said, well, why don't we make a video to go with it? So that's what we did.
And then we added that verse onto the end.
Yeah.
Listening to any songs of yours over the years with a political leaning to them, I've never felt they've come across in a soapboxy or preachy kind of way, like you're having your views forced upon us. Is that something you're always wary of when writing?
Well, I guess I would answer that by saying when I first started out writing songs, I loved American protest folk music from the early 60s, but I was not as fond of the protest music scene in the 80s. It just didn't feel, it felt cliched at that point.
Yep.
And it was partly just the times, and it was certainly like passionately anti-Reagan. So it wasn't that I didn't agree with the politics, I just didn't aesthetically like it. And I vowed never to write political songs.
I did not know that.
Well,
right now.
It didn't last very long. I mean, I would say by 2000, I had decided I would write political. Well, and also The King is Falling was somewhat political. But anyway, I'm surprised you say that. I feel like we are kind of preachy sometimes. And I think I don't know what it's like in Australia, but I'm imagining it's not that different from here in that there's just a gigantic gap right now between the left and the right that was not there when Katryna and I were growing up. And we grew up inside the Beltway in Washington, D.C., and my parents were Democrats, but we had lots of friends who were Republicans, and we went to a church that was like pretty much half and half, Democrats and Republicans, and people were civil to it, were more than civil. People loved each other.
They talked about issues.
And they talked about issues, but they wouldn't yell and they wouldn't demonize each other. And now it feels, to me anyway, it feels really moral. It feels like, and I'm saying this coming from the place of like, I think I'm morally right. and it's hard when you believe in something so strongly. And I recognize that the political right feels that they are coming from a moral place, and they think that I'm amoral, and it's really sad. It's really painful. But the stakes also seem very, very high, and as a mother, I want my children to inherit a world, first of all, where they can survive these climate. Anyway, you know what I'm not gonna, I care a lot. I think that Nerissa and I, like we said at the beginning, I think that there was part of us that felt like it was our job as humans to grow up to try to help people, like make the world a better place. And I sort of thought that the way to do that was to be a lawyer or a politician. Like Nerissa said, we grew up in the capital of our country. So that was sort of like, that's what people around us did in order to try to affect change. And often in the course of the last 5 years, I have felt like it was a selfish decision to become an artist, that I should have become a social worker or a lawyer or something, or a nurse or something that would have served people more directly. And I remember talking to Vance Gilbert backstage at a folk festival, probably in like 2017 or something.
Yeah, it was 2017.
And we were talking about this issue, and he said, the way I see it, we are, it's our responsibility to take care of the people who are on the front lines, the people who are the ACLU lawyers and the activists and the social workers and nurses and everybody.
Yeah.
And it's our job to take care of them with our music. So I feel like when Nerissa writes Tyrants Always Fall, she didn't write it in order to convince people who had voted for that guy, whose name we don't like to say, to change their mind. She wrote the song to give energy and strength to people who wanted to challenge him.
That's exactly right.
And so I think that's a little bit different than being on a soapbox and saying, believe what I'm saying. We assume that the people who are listening to us already believe what we're saying.
Yeah.
We're just trying to give them energy and strength and hope and light and comfort.
That's really well put. Yeah, I don't think that when I write, I'm thinking I've got to persuade somebody. I'm thinking exactly what you're saying. Like, I'm writing this to you, my audience that I've known for 30 years. I know what you need right now. It is a kind of a ministry, actually.
And that probably explains what we discussed before about why I don't feel like I'm being preached to. You're preaching to the converted here.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear that.
Hey, one thing you've both dabbled in a little bit is music for kids and families. Tell us how that evolved.
Well, that evolved because we, like I said, our parents sang to us when we were kids, and our parents live pretty far away from us, like about an 8-hour drive. And it made me sad that my kids weren't getting sung to by my parents. I just felt like I thought they were missing something that I had gotten. I loved having my parents sing to me, and I wanted my kids to have it. So I tricked my parents into coming up to our area for a while. They came up for Thanksgiving, and I scheduled my son's baptism for the Sunday after Thanksgiving, which meant that they were hours for 2 full days. And we dragged my father into the music studio that we had, and we made him sing and play his guitar for 2 full days. We recorded it all. And then we took some of those songs and, some of the ones that were our favorites, and added to them. And that was our first children's record. It was called All Together Singing in the Kitchen. And we felt proud of it. And we
we are fans who, like I said, they had been a little bit younger than us when they were listening to us play in the 90s. And by, 2004, they were having kids of their own. And it meant something to them to have one of the bands that they'd grown up with make music that they could share with their kids. And then I think it came out a lot of us just having children.
Well,
and the children wanting us to sing to them. I remember my son would crawl across the floor and bang on my guitar case until I took my guitar out. And I'm not really a guitarist. So I hadn't really played my guitar since college because I, lived with the people who played much better than I did. So it sort of gave me back music as a source of joy and not just as my job.
Well, also when I was pregnant with my oldest child, Lila, you went and took a music together course and got certified and got trained. And I remember calling you up. I remember exactly where I was sitting. I called you up about a week after Lila was born, and I said, you know that idea you had that maybe we should teach, music together type classes together, you and me? I'm in. I want to do it. Let's do it. And we put it together, and it was ready our curriculum was ready by September.
Yeah, and we have created this course called Hootenanny that we do for kids age 0 to 5. I now still teach it. I've been teaching it online to people all over the place, actually.
For 15 years.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been a while that we've been doing that, and we just chose music that we cared about. Nerissa wrote a bunch of new songs. I think when you have a child and you're a songwriter, I actually think when you have a child and even when you're not a songwriter, you probably make up songs.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're gonna buckle up your car seat, la 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 la, and because it makes the thing, it entertains the toddler until it makes them less cranky about whatever they're doing.
Yeah.
That was so much fun. I loved those years.
And Nerissa just wrote bazillions of songs, many of which we sort of adapted for our curriculum, some of which we ended up putting on children's records. We made a DVD.
And we wrote a book about making music with your family.
Yep.
That came out in 2011.
There has been a wonderful tradition through the years of folk artists writing songs for kids, going right back to Woody Guthrie and even further.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We sing a lot of those Woody Guthrie songs.
Yeah, they're great.
Hey, before we ride in your car.
Hey, before I let you go...
That pleases children every time.
Yeah.
Every time. Beep, beep. Yeah, he was genius.
Just before I let you go, Nerissa, I just wanted to ask about your songwriting retreats. They sound wonderful.
They're actually writing retreats. I in 2003, when I moved to Northampton after my divorce, I bought this house that was a little too big for just me and a little too expensive for my musician's salary. And I thought, you know what I really could do? I could run writing groups. And at the time, I was writing my first novel for Scholastic Books. And so I had that sort of credential. And I just hung up a shingle, and very quickly I'd filled some writing groups. And then I met my current husband, and he's very social. And so we started doing retreats, and it's just grown and morphed. And like Katryna with her Hootenanny classes, I've been able to continue my writing groups and even some retreats on Zoom. So it's turned into like my day job, a really fun day job that I have.
And do they become somewhat of a learning experience for yourself as well?
Oh, always. I mean, I think I'm fascinated by creativity and by people's creativity and how to nurture it and how to help people sort of with the stress around their ideas of art and creation and writing, especially. So I definitely learn a lot, and I got so interested in writing and in fiction in particular that I'm now in the middle of an MFA program at a university up here to study it.
And just one thing before I let you go, probably a standard interview question, but if you could both go back and talk to the young Nerissa and Katryna Nields just about to start their musical journey, what advice would you absolutely make sure you gave them?
I would tell them something that I think we figured out in our first year, which is don't ever let bitterness seep in.
Mm-hmm.
We saw a lot of older musicians who were so bitter, and it seemed so sad. It seemed like a corruption. And I guess the other advice I would give, and then I'll let Katryna talk, well, just to really cultivate gratitude around the privilege of getting to be a musician, and also to never read your press.
And mine is an actual regret, and it's an absurdity to say now, given that we all walk around with a camera in our pocket at all times. But I wish I'd taken more pictures.
Yeah.
I wish I'd taken more pictures when we were traveling around all the time. I wish I had more visual reminders of that time.
Yeah.
Because we have a lot. But I love to look at photographs, and I love to, and I think there's a way. I think that these are connected, actually. I feel like when I take pictures, it is an act of gratitude. It's like, I am grateful for this thing that's happening right now, and that's why I'm capturing it. And so it feels like not just, oh, it'll be nice to look at them later, but in the moment, when I take the picture, I'm saying, thank you for this moment.
Oh, that's beautiful.
That's a lovely way to finish. Hey, Nerissa, Katryna, thank you so much for being so generous with your time. I know I've kept you a lot longer than I said I would, but it was just an absolute pleasure talking to you.
It was a
lovely
pleasure, John. Oh, and actually, before you go, one of our fans wanted to know if they could be able to access listening to this. Is this going to be something that people in the U.S. can?
Oh, by all means, yeah. We stream online, so I will send you all the official airing details, so you'll be able to do that, yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you, John.
My pleasure indeed, and thank you so much, and thanks for all the wonderful music, and we're sure there's plenty more to come yet.
Thank you. Happy Monday.
Happy Sunday evening.
Bye-bye.
All the best. Bye-bye.